The proposal arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped between contracts and financial reports, and Georgia Nichols almost dismissed it as another corporate dinner she would politely decline. But the letterhead caught her eye: Wellington Luxury Yachts, requesting her presence as a date to their annual charity gala. Not as a guest, as someone's fake girlfriend. The offer included a check with more zeros than she typically saw in 3 months of working at the nonprofit literacy center. Georgia read the letter twice, her coffee growing cold on her cluttered desk. The request came from someone named Carter Wellington, CEO of the yacht manufacturing company, who needed a date for appearances. Professional only. One evening. She would receive $10,000 for roughly 4 hours of her time, playing the role of his girlfriend at a black tie event where investors and board members would be watching his every move. Her first instinct was to laugh. Her second was to look at the stack of overdue bills wedged under her keyboard and the notice from her landlord about the rent increase starting next month. Working at the literacy center filled her heart but emptied her wallet. She loved teaching adults to read, watching their faces light up when words finally made sense, but passion did not pay for groceries or keep the lights on. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the letterhead before she could talk herself out of it. A smooth male voice answered after 2 rings. "Carter Wellington. This is Georgia Nichols," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I received your letter about the gala." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "I was not sure you would call. Most people think it's a joke." "Is it?" "Not at all. I need a date for Friday evening. Someone who won't expect anything beyond that one night. Someone who can handle herself in a room full of wealthy people asking invasive questions. And someone who will not sell the story to tabloids afterward." Georgia twisted the phone cord around her finger. "Why me? You must know dozens of women who would go with you." "That's exactly the problem," Carter said. "Everyone I know in my social circle has expectations or ulterior motives. You run a literacy nonprofit. You have no connection to my world. You need the money based on the public financial statements of your organization, and according to my research, you're genuine. That's rare." She should have been offended that he investigated her, but she was too practical to care. "What would I have to do?" "Stand beside me. Smile. Make small talk. Pretend you're hopelessly in love with me for a few hours. Can you do that?" Georgia glanced at the photo of her students on the wall, their proud faces holding up their first completed books. She thought about the reading program she wanted to expand but could not afford. "Yes. I can do that." "Good. I'll have my assistant send over the details and a contract. The gala is Friday at 7. I'll pick you up at 6. He hung up before she could ask any more questions, leaving her staring at the phone and wondering what she had just agreed to. The contract arrived by messenger that afternoon, professional and thorough. It outlined expectations, payment terms, and a non-disclosure agreement that made her head spin. She signed it anyway, scanning it back with shaking hands. The advance payment hit her account the next morning, $5,000 that made her want to cry with relief. Friday arrived faster than she expected. Georgia borrowed a black dress from her friend Maya, who worked at an upscale boutique and had access to designer samples. The dress hugged her curves in ways her usual jeans and sweaters never did, and Maya insisted on doing her makeup and hair. "You look like you belong on a red carpet," Maya said, stepping back to admire her work. "Who is this guy again?" "Just someone who needs a date for a work thing," Georgia said, not wanting to explain the arrangement. It felt strange enough without having to defend it to her friends. The buzzer rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Georgia grabbed the small clutch Maya had provided and took a deep breath before heading downstairs. A sleek black car waited at the curb, and when the back door opened, Carter Wellington stepped out. She had looked him up online, of course, but the photos had not prepared her for the reality. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked artfully messy and sharp features that belonged in a cologne advertisement. His suit probably cost more than her monthly salary, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders and lean frame. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark and intense, studying her with the same assessment she was giving him. "Georgia," he said, and his voice was even better in person, deep and smooth. "You look perfect. You sound surprised, pleasantly so." He offered his hand to help her into the car, and his palm was warm and rough with calluses that seemed out of place on a CEO. "Ready to pretend you're madly in love with me? I'll do my best," she said, settling into the leather seat. "Though you might want to tell me something about yourself first. I should probably know more than what's on your Wikipedia page." Carter slid in beside her, and the driver pulled away from the curb. "What do you want to know? Why do you need a fake date?" "A man who looks like you and has your bank account should not have trouble finding a real one." He laughed, and it sounded genuine. "Direct. I like that. The truth is, my board of directors thinks I'm too much of a playboy. I've had a string of short relationships that ended badly, and they're concerned it reflects poorly on the company. We're about to close a major deal with investors who value family and stability. They want to see that I can commit to something beyond building boats." "So you hired someone to pretend to be your committed relationship." "The irony is not lost on me," Carter admitted. "But it's easier than trying to convince someone real to put up with my schedule and the scrutiny that comes with my life. This way, everyone gets what they need. You get paid, I get my board off my back, and nobody gets hurt." Georgia studied his profile as city lights flickered past the window. "That's a lonely way to live. It's practical." He turned to face her, and something flickered in his eyes that might have been vulnerability. "Tell me about you. Why do you work at a nonprofit when you clearly need money?" "Because reading changed my life," she said simply. "My mom was illiterate. She hid it well, but I figured it out when I was 10. I taught her to read using my school books, and watching her face when she read her first complete novel made me understand what real success looks like. Money is great, but helping someone discover the world through words is better." Carter was quiet for a moment. "That's remarkable." "It's just what matters to me." She smoothed down her dress, suddenly self-conscious. "So what's our story? How did we meet?" "I was thinking we should keep it close to the truth. We met through a charity event, hit it off, and have been seeing each other for a few months, casual but promising. And when they ask me personal questions about you, be vague, say I'm private. Most people who know me will believe that." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. "You should wear this." Georgia opened it to find a delicate bracelet, silver with small diamonds that caught the light. "This is too much. It's on loan. My assistant will collect it at the end of the night, but you need to look the part." He took it from the box and fastened it around her wrist, his fingers gentle against her skin. The touch sent an unexpected shiver up her arm. The gala was held at a waterfront estate that looked like something from a movie. All glass and modern architecture, with views of the harbor where yachts bobbed in their slips. Carter helped her out of the car, and immediately his hand found the small of her back, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. "Smile," he murmured as they approached the entrance. "We're madly in love, remember." Georgia pasted on her brightest smile and let him guide her inside. The room was full of people in expensive clothes, holding champagne glasses and talking in clusters. A string quartet played near the windows, and waiters circulated with trays of food that looked more like art than dinner. "Carter," a silver-haired man approached, his wife on his arm. "Good to see you, son. And who is this lovely young woman?" Richard Susan, This is Georgia Nichols. Georgia, Richard is on our board, and Susan is the real power behind the throne." Georgia shook their hands, channeling every ounce of confidence she did not feel. "It's wonderful to meet you both." "How did you two meet?" Susan asked, her eyes sharp despite her warm smile. "At a charity event," Georgia said smoothly. "Carter was the guest speaker, and I was representing my organization. He spilled champagne on my dress, and we've been inseparable since." Carter squeezed her waist gently, and when she glanced up at him, he was grinning. "She's letting me off easy. I completely drenched her." "How romantic," Susan said, though she looked skeptical. "And what do you do, Georgia?" "I run a literacy center for adults. We teach reading and writing skills to people who fell through the cracks of the education system." "How noble," Richard said, in a tone that made it clear he thought it was a waste of time. "Carter, we need to discuss the Singapore deal. Can I steal you for a moment?" Carter's hand tightened on her back. "I would rather not leave Georgia alone." "I'll be fine," Georgia said, even though her stomach was twisting. "Go talk business." He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a kiss to her temple that felt surprisingly natural. "I'll be right back." Watching him walk away, Georgia felt suddenly exposed. Susan was still studying her with those calculating eyes. "How long have you been seeing each other?" Susan asked. "A few months. We're taking it slow." "Carter does not usually do slow. He's more of a fast and fleeting type." Georgia met her gaze steadily. "Maybe he just needed to meet the right person." Susan's expression softened slightly. "Maybe he did. For his sake, I hope you're real. That boy has been running from something his whole life. It would be nice to see him stand still for once." Before Georgia could respond, another couple approached, and she was swept into a round of introductions and small talk that made her head spin. Everyone wanted to know about Carter's new girlfriend, and she found herself crafting a relationship from thin air, adding details that felt more real the more she spoke them. Carter returned after 20 minutes, and the relief on his face when he found her holding her own surprised her. "You're a natural," he murmured, guiding her toward the bar. "Half the room is already gossiping about us." "Is that good?" "It's exactly what we need." He ordered 2 glasses of champagne and handed her one. "Thank you for this. I know it's strange." "It's definitely the weirdest thing I've ever done for money," Georgia admitted. "But everyone here seems nice enough. Wealthy and intimidating, but nice." "They're sharks in designer clothes," Carter said, "but they seem to like you, which is impressive." "Most people either try too hard or freeze up completely. I teach nervous adults how to read in front of others. This is just a different kind of performance." He studied her with something like admiration. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who would be impressed by all this." He gestured to the room. "The money, the luxury, the lifestyle, but you look at it like it's just another Tuesday." Georgia sipped her champagne. "Because it is just another Tuesday. Tomorrow I'll be back in my real life, teaching someone how to sound out words and celebrating when they finish their first book. This is beautiful, but it's not real. What if I told you some of it could be real?" Carter's voice was lower now, and when she looked up at him, his expression was serious. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the lights dimmed, and a voice announced that dinner was being served. Carter led her to a table near the front, where more board members and their spouses waited. The meal was elaborate, course after course of food Georgia could not name, and the conversation flowed around her like a river. She contributed when spoken to, asked polite questions, and kept one hand on the table near Carter's, a casual intimacy that felt less fake as the evening progressed. His hand found hers during dessert, his thumb rubbing small circles on her palm. When she glanced at him in question, he leaned close. "They're watching," he whispered. "We should look comfortable with each other." But his touch felt like more than performance. It felt warm and real and surprisingly right. After dinner, there was dancing. Carter pulled her onto the floor as the string quartet transitioned to something slow and romantic. His hand settled on her waist and hers rested on his shoulder, and they moved together like they had done this 100 times before. "You're good at this," Georgia said. "Ballroom dancing lessons as a kid. My mother insisted." He spun her gently and she followed easily. "What about you?" "YouTube videos and natural rhythm." She smiled up at him. "I'm faking most of it." I could not tell. His voice was soft and his eyes held hers in a way that made her breath catch. "Georgia, I need to be honest with you." "About what?" "This does not feel as fake as it's supposed to." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "Carter, I know. I know this was supposed to be simple and professional, but I've enjoyed tonight more than any real date I've had in years. You're smart and genuine and you do not want anything from me except the money you earned." That's intoxicating. Georgia wanted to step back to remind him this was a job, but her body would not cooperate. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I would like to see you again. For real this time. No contract, no performance, just us." She should say no. She should take her check and go back to her real life where CEOs did not ask her out and designer dresses were not part of her closet. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, she found herself nodding. "Okay, one real date." The smile that spread across his face was worth more than the $10,000 in her account. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of warmth and possibilities. Carter kept her close, and when people approached, he introduced her with a pride that felt genuine. She met his business partners, his investors, and several board members who all seemed charmed by her presence. By the time they left, she was exhausted but strangely exhilarated. In the car, Carter kept her hand in his, their fingers intertwined. "That went better than I could have hoped," he said. "Richard told me you were a keeper. I'm glad I could help." Georgia leaned her head back against the seat, the adrenaline of the evening fading. This was the strangest night of my life, in a good way, in a complicated way. She turned to look at him. "You were serious about wanting to see me again, completely serious." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her. "I'll call you tomorrow. We can plan something that does not involve pretending." When they reached her apartment, Carter walked her to the door like a gentleman from another era. He stood close, and she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her want to lean in. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. Thank you for the opportunity. The money will help a lot of people. I'll send the rest of the payment tomorrow." He hesitated, then cupped her face gently. "Can I kiss you, not for show, just because I want to?" Georgia's logical brain screamed at her to say no, but her heart was louder. "Yes." He kissed her softly, his lips warm and careful against hers. It was not demanding or rushed, just sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Good night, Georgia." "Good night, Carter." She watched him return to the car, her lips still tingling, and wondered what she had gotten herself into. The next morning, Georgia woke to a text from Carter asking her to dinner on Wednesday. She stared at her phone for 5 minutes before responding with a simple yes. The remaining $5,000 appeared in her account by noon, along with a note from his assistant about the return of the bracelet, which would be collected Monday. Maya called her that afternoon, demanding details. "So how was the fake date with the mysterious businessman?" Maya asked. "Complicated," Georgia admitted, curling up on her couch. "He wants to take me on a real date." Maya squealed so loudly that Georgia had to pull the phone away from her ear. "Are you serious? Georgia, this is like something from a romance novel. It's insane. He's a CEO of a yacht company." "I teach people to read in a building with leaky pipes. We're from completely different worlds." So what? You like him. I barely know him. But even as she said it, Georgia knew it was not entirely true. She had spent hours with Carter, watching how he treated people, how he listened when she spoke, the way his eyes softened when she talked about her students. She had seen glimpses of the man behind the money. Then get to know him, Maya said. What do you have to lose? Everything, Georgia thought. Her heart, her peace of mind, her simple life that made sense. But she kept those thoughts to herself. Wednesday arrived with spring rain that made the city smell fresh and new. Georgia changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple blue dress that Meyer approved via video call. Carter picked her up at 7 in a different car, something low and fast that made her nervous. "Where are we going?" she asked as he navigated through traffic. "It's a surprise. But I promise you'll like it." They drove out of the city, past the suburbs, until they reached a small coastal town Georgia had never visited. Carter parked near a tiny restaurant that looked like it had been there for decades, weathered wood and salt-stained windows facing the ocean. "This is my favorite place," Carter said, helping her out of the car. "Nobody knows me here. I can just be myself." Inside, the restaurant was cozy and warm, with fishing nets on the walls and candles on the tables. An older woman greeted Carter with a hug and a stream of Italian that made him laugh. "Georgia, this is Rosa. She's been feeding me since I was a kid." Rosa looked Georgia up and down, then nodded approvingly. "Finally, you bring a nice girl, pretty and smart eyes. You sit. I bring you the good food." They were ushered to a corner table with an ocean view, and Rosa disappeared into the kitchen before they could order. "She's going to bring us everything," Carter warned. "I hope you're hungry." "Starving, actually." Georgia relaxed into her chair, surprised by how comfortable this felt. "You came here as a kid. My grandfather built boats. Not luxury yachts, just fishing boats and small vessels. He brought me here every Sunday after we worked in his shop. Rosa always made sure I ate well." Carter's expression grew distant. "He died when I was 16, left me his business, which was struggling. I built it into what it is now, but sometimes I miss the simplicity of those days." "Is that why you have calluses?" Georgia asked, remembering the roughness of his hands. "You still build." He looked surprised. "You notice that?" "I notice a lot of things. I still work in the shop sometimes when the stress gets too much. There's something honest about working with your hands, creating something tangible. The business side is all numbers and politics. In the shop, it's just me and the wood and the water." Rosa returned with wine and a basket of bread that smelled like heaven. Georgia tore into it gratefully, and Carter watched her with amusement. "What?" she asked around a mouthful. "You're refreshing. Most women I date barely eat." "I'm not most women, and this bread is amazing." The food kept coming. Dishes Georgia could not name but tasted incredible. They talked between courses, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, the things that kept them awake at night. Carter was surprisingly easy to talk to when he was not playing the role of CEO, and Georgia found herself laughing more than she had in months. "Tell me about your mom," Carter said over dessert. "You said teaching her to read changed your life." Georgia set down her fork, the sweetness of the cannoli suddenly bitter. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer. But before she went, she read every book she could get her hands on. She said I gave her wings, but really she taught me what love looks like." She was ashamed of not being able to read, but she never let it stop her from being an amazing mother. Carter reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm sorry you lost her. Me too. But her legacy is why I do what I do. Every person I teach to read is a little piece of her living on." They stayed until Rosa kicked them out, insisting they were keeping her from her bed. Carter left cash on the table that was probably triple the bill, and Rosa hugged them both at the door. Outside, The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and cool. They walked along the beach, Georgia carrying her shoes and Carter with his jacket slung over his shoulder. The moon was bright enough to light their way. "I had a good time tonight," Georgia said. "This was better than the gala. No pretending required." Carter stopped walking and turned to face her. "I want to keep seeing you, Georgia. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I have not felt this comfortable with anyone in years. Your life is complicated. Mine is simple. I do not know if those two things can mix. What if we try? Take it slow, see where it goes. No pressure, no expectations." Georgia looked out at the ocean, waves rolling endlessly to shore. She thought about playing it safe, protecting her heart, going back to her predictable life. Then she thought about the way Carter looked at her like she was something precious, the way he listened to her stories and shared his own, the way his hand felt in hers. "Okay," she said, "we can try." He kissed her then, and it was not careful or tentative like the first time. It was real and deep and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Carter rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to do my best not to mess this up," he said. "Me too." They dated for 3 months, and it was both wonderful and challenging. Carter's schedule was insane, but he made time for her, showing up at the literacy center after work to help with evening classes, taking her to his workshop to show her the yacht he was building with his own hands, introducing her to his small circle of real friends who seemed shocked he was in a relationship that lasted longer than a few weeks. Georgia's world expanded in ways she never expected. Carter took her sailing, taught her about the business he loved, shared the parts of his life that mattered. But he never made her feel small for her own dreams. Instead, he donated to the literacy center, helped her apply for grants, and showed genuine interest in her students' progress. But the differences in their worlds became harder to ignore as time went on. Carter's business demanded constant attention, and there were nights he had to cancel plans for emergency meetings or last-minute flights. Georgia understood, but it hurt each time she ate dinner alone or attended events solo because he was working. The breaking point came on a Friday night when Carter was supposed to meet her friends for the first time. She waited at the restaurant for an hour before getting a text that he was stuck in a conference call with overseas investors. Her friends were understanding, but Georgia felt humiliated and frustrated. When Carter showed up at her apartment at midnight with apologies and flowers, she was ready for a fight. "This is not going to work," she said, not letting him inside. "Your life is planes and meetings and obligations. Mine is consistent and present. I need someone who can show up." "I'm here now," Carter said, desperation in his voice. "I'm sorry about tonight. The call ran long and I could not. There's always going to be a call or a meeting or a crisis. I get that your work is important, but so is mine. So am I. And I cannot be with someone who only has time for me when it's convenient. That's not fair. I make time for you whenever I can. Whenever you can is not enough." Georgia felt tears building but refused to let them fall. "I think we should take a break. Figure out if this is really what we both want." Carter looked like she had slapped him. "A break, Georgia, I love you." The words hung between them the first time either had said them. Georgia's heart broke a little more. "I love you too," she whispered. "But sometimes love is not enough." He left, and she closed the door and cried until she had no tears left. 2 weeks passed in misery. Georgia threw herself into work, but everything reminded her of Carter. Her students asked about the nice man who used to help with classes. Maya called every day to check on her. The Literacy Center received a massive anonymous donation that Georgia knew came from him. Carter did not call or text, respecting her request for space, but she saw evidence of him everywhere. Articles about Wellington Yachts landing their biggest deal yet. Photos of him at events, always alone, looking tired. She wanted to reach out but did not know what to say. The answer came from an unexpected source. Susan, the board member's wife from the gala, showed up at the literacy center on a Tuesday afternoon. "We need to talk," Susan said, settling into Georgia's small office chair like she owned the place. "About what?" Georgia asked warily. "About the fact that Carter has been absolutely miserable since you two broke up and he's driving everyone crazy. He worked 30 hours straight last week and snapped at 3 board members. Richard wants to send him on mandatory vacation. That's not my problem anymore." "Is not it?" Susan's gaze was sharp. "Georgia, I've known Carter since he was a boy working in his grandfather's shop. I watched him build an empire from nothing, saw him date dozens of women who only wanted his money or his name. Then you came along, and for the first time I saw him happy. Really, genuinely happy. He smiled at board meetings. He took weekends off. He talked about plans beyond the next quarter's profits." Georgia felt her defenses crumbling. "He could not make time for me. His work always came first. Because he's terrified of failing. His grandfather trusted him with the business, and Carter has spent 15 years proving he deserved that trust. But in the process, he forgot how to have a life outside of work." Susan leaned forward. "He's learning, Georgia. Slowly and imperfectly, but he's learning. The question is, are you willing to meet him halfway?" After Susan left, Georgia sat in her office for a long time, thinking about love and compromise and what she really wanted. She thought about Carter's laugh, the way he held her hand, how he looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world even when that world was pulling him in a dozen directions. She called him that night, "Georgia." His voice was rough, like he had not been sleeping. "Can you meet me tomorrow at Rose's restaurant?" There was a pause, then, "I'll be there." Georgia arrived first, her stomach a mess of nerves. When Carter walked in, he looked thinner, tired, but his face lit up when he saw her. "Hi," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hi." She took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." "Me too. Let me go first." She reached across the table and he took her hand immediately. "I love you. I love your dedication and your passion and how hard you work, but I need to know that I matter too. That you'll prioritize us sometimes, even when work is demanding." "You do matter," Carter said fiercely. "You matter more than anything. These past 2 weeks have been hell. I could not focus, could not sleep. All I thought about was how I messed up, how I let work come between us." He squeezed her hand. "I talked to my board. I'm hiring a co-CEO, someone to share the responsibilities so I can have an actual life. It's going to take time to transition, but I'm committed to making this work." Georgia felt tears prick her eyes. "You're hiring a co-CEO. The company will survive without me running every detail, but I will not survive without you." His voice cracked slightly. "I meant what I said that night. I love you, Georgia. I want to build a life with you, not just squeeze you into the margins of mine. I want that too." She moved around the table to his side and he pulled her into his lap, holding her tight. "I'm sorry I pushed you away. You were right to. I needed the wake-up call." He kissed her softly. "I promise to do better, to be present, to show up for you the way you show up for everyone else." Rosa appeared with wine and tissues, tusking at them in Italian before leaving them alone. They talked for hours, making plans and promises. Carter told her about his ideas for expanding the literacy program with company funding. Georgia shared her dream of opening satellite centers in other cities. They both acknowledged the challenges ahead, but committed to facing them together. When they finally left, Carter drove them back to the city, but took a detour to the harbor where his yachts were docked. He led her to a medium-sized boat, nothing like the luxury vessels she had seen in the showroom, and helped her aboard. "I built this one myself," he said. "Been working on it for 2 years. It's almost finished." The craftsmanship was beautiful, every detail carefully considered. Georgia ran her hand along the smooth wood, imagining the hours he had spent creating this. "What will you do with it when it's done?" she asked. "I was thinking we could sail it together. Take weekends away from the city, just us and the water." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "If you want to, I want to." She turned in his arms and kissed him. "I want everything with you." They made love on the boat that night, slow and tender, relearning each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together under a blanket, listening to the water lap against the hull. "Move in with me," Carter said into the darkness. "What? Move in with me? I have way too much space, and I hate coming home to an empty house. Plus, your apartment has terrible heating." Georgia laughed. "That's very practical and not at all romantic." "Fine. Move in with me because I love waking up next to you and want to do it every day. Because I want to make you breakfast and hear about your day and fall asleep holding you. Is that better?" "Much better." "And yes, I'll move in with you." The transition took a month, but by summer Georgia was settled into Carter's modern downtown loft with her books and her plants, and her small collection of mismatched furniture that he insisted added character. They fell into a rhythm, learning to navigate each other's schedules and needs. True to his word, Carter hired a co-CEO, a sharp woman named Patricia who took over the day-to-day operations while Carter focused on design and long-term strategy. It was not perfect, but he was home for dinner most nights, and when he had to travel, he brought Georgia with him when she could get away. The literacy center thrived with Wellington Yachts support. They opened 2 new locations and hired 3 more teachers. Georgia's students graduated in record numbers, and she started a publishing program to help them share their stories. A year after they met at the gala, Carter took her back to that same venue for another charity event. Georgia wore a new dress, deep red this time, and the bracelet from their first night, which Carter had bought from the jeweler and given her for Christmas. "You remember last year?" he asked as they danced. "When this was all pretend, hard to forget. I was terrified I would mess up and ruin your business deal. You were perfect. You are perfect." He spun her out and pulled her back in. "I have a question for you." "What kind of question?" Carter led her out to the terrace, where the harbor lights sparkled and the air smelled like salt in summer. He turned to face her, and Georgia's heart started racing when he dropped to one knee. "Georgia Nichols, you changed my life. You taught me that success is not just about building a company, but building a life worth living. You make me want to be better, to slow down, to appreciate what matters. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone." He pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a stunning ring. "Will you marry me?" Georgia's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes, of course yes." He slid the ring on her finger and stood, lifting her into a kiss that felt like coming home. People on the terrace applauded, and Georgia laughed through her tears. "When did you plan this?" she asked. "I've been carrying that ring for 2 months, waiting for the perfect moment." He kissed her again. "I wanted it to be special. Anywhere with you is special." They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Rosa's restaurant, with close friends and family. Georgia's students formed a choir that sang during the ceremony, and Carter cried when she walked down the aisle. It was simple and perfect, and exactly what they both wanted. For their honeymoon, Carter took her sailing on the boat he had built, just the 2 of them and the open water for 2 weeks. They talked about the future, about the family they wanted to build, about the dreams they would chase together. 2 years later, Georgia stood in the nursery of their house overlooking the harbor, holding their daughter Rosalie. named after the woman who had fed Carter and given them a place to fall in love. Carter wrapped his arms around them both, and Georgia leaned back against his chest. "She's perfect," Carter whispered. "She really is." Georgia looked up at him. "Can you believe this is our life? Sometimes I have to pinch myself. I hired you to pretend to be my girlfriend for one night, and now you're my wife and the mother of my child. Best business decision you ever made." "The only one that really mattered." He kissed her temple. "I love you, Mrs. Wellington. I love you too." Rosalie stirred in Georgia's arms, and they both laughed softly. Outside, the sun was setting over the water, painting everything gold and pink. It was the kind of moment Georgia used to dream about when she was younger, believing that kind of happiness only existed in stories. But standing here in this house, with this man and this baby, she knew the truth was better than any fiction. Sometimes the best love stories started with a little pretending and became more real than anyone expected. The Literacy Center continued to grow, becoming a model for adult education programs nationwide. Carter scaled back even more at Wellington Yachts, focusing on design and spending more time with his family. They had a son 2 years after Rosalie, named Thomas after Carter's grandfather, and their home was always full of laughter and love and boats of all sizes because both children inherited their father's passion for the water. On quiet nights after the kids were asleep, Carter and Georgia would sit on their terrace overlooking the harbor, holding hands and watching the boats drift by. They would talk about their days, their dreams, the life they had built together from that one fake date. "You ever regret it?" Georgia asked one night. "Taking a chance on hiring a stranger? Never. You're the best risk I ever took." Carter brought her hand to his lips. "What about you? Ever regret saying yes to a crazy proposal from a desperate CEO?" Georgia thought about the letter that had arrived on a Tuesday morning, the check that had seemed too good to be true, the leap of faith she had taken into a world so different from her own. She thought about the love she had found, the family they had created, the happiness that filled every corner of her life. "Not for a single second," she said, and kissed him as the stars came out over the water. Their story had started with pretend, with a contract and a performance and the careful construction of a fake relationship. But what grew from that foundation was real and solid and true. They had learned that love was not about perfection or grand gestures, but about showing up, making time, choosing each other every single day. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Georgia and Carter would smile at each other and tell the truth. They had started as strangers playing a role, but somewhere between the performance and reality, they had found something neither expected. They had found home. And that was the best ending of all.